everybody, Chris the Old Ass Retro Gamer here. Today I'm here to talk about a brand new console that I added to my collection back in October. And if you haven't already noticed it, sitting right behind me, it is the Vectrex. And what is the Vectrex for those of you who aren't in the know? Well, it is a vector-based all-in-one console that was released in 1982. It was developed by Western Technologies and Smith Engineering, and then licensed to GCE, which was General Consumer Electronics. And it was released in 1982 originally, and it lasted all the way through 1984. At that point, Milton Bradley had licensed it and was releasing games for it, and then the video game crash just completely decimated it. Plus, it was dealing with competition from the Atari 2600, the ColecoVision, and the Intellivision. It came out at about $199, so it was not cheap, but by the time it had left the market in 1984, it was down to about $50. Wish I bought one back then. And I also bet you like vector graphics. That sounds really familiar. It was a new, cool way to display graphics on screen. A lot of arcade games that came out in the early 80s, games like Asteroids, Battlezone, Cosmic Chasm, Major Havoc, Rip-Off, Star Castle, Star Trek, Star Wars, and Tempest all used it. It was super popular, but you gotta give it up to Western Technologies and Smith Engineering because they were able to miniaturize it and release it in a decently affordable home console. Yes, it's its own thing, but it has handles on it. You can bring it to a friend's house if they don't have it. So what does the Vectrex do? Well, the Vectrex is right here. It has a vertical screen, obviously, because a lot of the arcade games at the time used that kind of configuration. But the thing is, it's in black and white. Your controller plugs in here underneath. Like I said, it is all self-contained. It is actually not that big. It's a little deep, but that's okay. But the cool thing is the controller here snaps into place and actually folds up into the console itself to make it easier to store, which I think is rad. The controller itself is corded, obviously. Back in the day, didn't have that infrared shit. 4 different buttons and a nice little controller here. You have a knob here, which turns the console on, and it does buzz quite a bit. It is also your volume control, and you also have one here for resetting. You don't need to have any games off the bat to play this thing. It has a game built into it called Mindstorm. And the thing is that since these games are all in black and white, you need these overlays, which are kind of like what you would put on the Intellivision controller in order to tell you what all the different numeral buttons would do. But this one goes over the screen. Mindstorm, the built-in game, came with its own overlay, which would come with the console, and it just snaps on these little clips right here. And there you go. You instantly have a pseudo-colored screen. And usually the overlays have information you need. Like right here, it says Player 1 and Player 2, so that'll tell you how many lives you have. This one also tells you what the buttons do. So first button is escape, the second button is thrust, and the third button is fire. Each game comes on its own little cartridge, just like this. They're smaller than an Atari 2600 cartridge. They plug into the side here. And each game also comes with its own specific overlay.
Everybody got that?
I remember my parents taking me to Toys R Us back in the day, and we'd be walking around looking at the Atari games and stuff, and I'd always see the Vectrex sitting there, and I was always like, can I have that for Christmas one year? And my parents would look at the price and go, yeah, right.
Dreams are for suckers!
When I got back into collecting in 2013, it was something that I said, you know, eventually I'm going to have to find a way to get a Vectrex, because I did know that they were kind of expensive. I knew it was going to take a little bit of doing to get it, and how did I end up getting this beauty right here? Well, Craigslist. Well, it's kind of a weird process. So Half Price Books has like these warehouse sales every once in a while. There was one that was happening in Milwaukee, Wisconsin that a couple of friends and I went to check out. And there was this gaming store called Makes Sense Variety Store that I always wanted to check out. Since we were in the Milwaukee area for this warehouse sale, I said, let's go check it out. And we did. It was a great store. It was super awesome. Everything in there was reasonably priced. And then I saw one specific thing in one of their cabinets where they had like the specialty items, and it was a Vectrex game. It was a licensed game of a franchise which I absolutely love. It was the video game based on Star Trek the Motion Picture. Me being the huge Star Trek fan that I am, and you know I am, I absolutely had to have it. Even though I didn't own the console, I thought this would just be a great little collectible since I'm trying to get all the Star Trek based console games. This would be rad to have. And then because I picked this up, I started looking more and more into the Vectrex and started actively looking around to see if I could find one. I was putzing around on Craigslist at work while I was on lunch one day. Just so happened to see that there was a guy selling a Vectrex, the console, the controller, and 8 complete in-box games, some of which were worth a lot of money. So what I ended up paying for the console and these games was way cheaper than it would have cost to buy everything separately. I'm not going to tell you how much, but it's cheaper than you would think. And which is why I jumped on it. I immediately contacted the guy and said, I'm completely interested. And I met the dude. He was a nice guy. He seemed to have been selling all of his dad's old video game stuff, which is why he really didn't seem to know how much this thing was going for. Didn't seem to do a lot of research. I wasn't going to throw any help his way.
Strategery.
Once I picked this thing up, I went a little crazy. I bought as many Vectrex games as I could possibly find. So when it comes to all the games that I purchased, let's start off with the one that I bought first that kicked off this whole thing. Star Trek the Motion Picture. So what kind of a game is it? It doesn't really have anything to do with the movie itself. Basically in title only, and there's Klingons in it. You're playing as the Enterprise, you have a reticle or an aiming crosshair in the middle of the screen, and you just basically have to go looking around for ships to shoot and destroy. And that's it. It's not even really based on the old Star Trek arcade game, which was a vector-based game to begin with. But that's not really a bad thing. It's not a bad game. It's actually quite fun in little spurts. There are much better games for the console. It is worth having because it is fun. So what kind of a game is Mindstorm, the built-in game? Well, it is honestly a ripoff of Asteroids. It's the simplest game they could have possibly programmed into here. You play as a little ship that can zip around the screen just like an Asteroids, and there are different shaped objects coming at you that when you shoot them will break off into smaller pieces, and then you shoot those until they're gone. There's little UFOs that'll come by and shoot at you. You can see the comparison. It is pretty much the exact same game. Just as fun, though, I will admit. It is super fun to play. There's Bedlam, which is basically Tempest in reverse. And what do I mean by that? Well, you have a web, just like in Tempest, but instead of your ship being on the edge of the web and moving around its perimeter, you're in the center, and things are coming from the edges towards you. And you just basically have to spin your little character around and shoot all the different things coming at you. And every time you beat a level, the orientation changes and makes it a little bit harder. There might be more areas that ships will come out of. Sometimes there might be less, but more come out at the same time, and it gets harder and harder to keep up with it. It gets really frantic the further you get into it. It's a lot of fun. I like it a lot. Next is Ripoff, which is actually a port of a vector-based arcade game. You basically have a bunch of items that are hovering in the center of the screen, and then these ships will come from off-screen and try to pick those items up and take them away, and you'll play as a little ship that circles around the screen. You can thrust around all you want, and you have to destroy those ships before they can make off with your goods. It's kind of like Defender, I guess, except it's all centered on one screen instead of being a side-scrolling shooter. It is very, very hard, but it's enjoyable. It's not so hard that I don't want to play it, but it is a good game. I like it. Next is Web Wars, one of the more expensive games for the console, and this is the Tempest ripoff you've been looking for, except the angles are a little bit different, and usually the webs are not attached or like, in a big circle pattern or some star pattern. No, these looks kind of like a ravine in 3D. It's a lot of fun. It's very, very hard. It gets very crazy. And the thing is, you're collecting and capturing these creatures that are coming at you, and then you have a trophy room that you can go into to look at them later. So instead of destroying things, you are capturing them, and then you get points for how many different creatures you collected at the end of the round. Different enough, same concept, fun. This one is probably the simplest, and it is also my favorite one out of the bunch. Clean Sweep. This is a Pac-Man ripoff. Just different enough to keep things interesting, though. You basically play as a vacuum cleaner. You go around sucking up all these pellets, which is representing money, before these bank robbers that look like these Pac-Man looking things can pick them up. And then once your vacuum cleaner gets filled up, because as you're collecting these dots, your bag will get bigger and bigger, and then you can't carry anymore, and then you have to go to the center area of the screen where the ghosts would normally pop out of in Pac-Man and dump all the money and then go out and get the rest. And then once you have cleared the board, you move on to the next round. And then instead of power pellets, you have these areas in the corners where you can go into, and it will power you up, and then you can go around and kill all the bank robbers. They'll go away, but they'll come back. There's areas where you can exit if you get into a jam and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, it is Pac-Man with a slight twist. I like this one a hell of a lot. Like I said, this is probably my favorite game out of the bunch that I have. Berserk, which is a port of an arcade game that was not vector-based. And sadly, this is not the best version of Berserk ever made. It's actually really slow compared to what I remember the arcade game being like, even when compared to the Atari 2600 game. But it's essentially like a shooter in a big maze. There's these robots roaming around that you can destroy. They're out to kill you, obviously. The walls are electrified, so if you touch one of the walls, you instantly die. And if you spend too much time in the level, this killer sphere named Evil Otto will come out and take you out. You don't have to destroy all the robots in the area, but that's just to rack up points. But you basically just have to escape the maze. Like I said, not my favorite port of this game. I mean, it is playable. It is fine. But like I said, it is just a little slow. One of the vector-based arcade ports is Armor Attack. This kind of reminds me of Combat, or even the tank game from the Tron arcade game. You play as a Jeep that just roams around these maze levels. There's tanks roaming around, and then there's also a helicopter that'll come and chase you down. All you really have to do is destroy everything on screen, move on to the next one. It's extremely simple. but a lot of fun. From what I understand, this one is great as a 2-player game. This next one, I saw Lord Carnage playing on his channel, Classic Game Room, and that is Fortress of Narzad. This is one of the games that came with the console that made me say, this is kind of a good deal. This is one of the coolest games on the console that I own, and it is basically like Krull for the Atari 2600, where you're basically making your way to this castle in the background, and you go through these like chasms in between, and you play as this little dude or ship, or I don't know what he's supposed to be, shooting at everything that comes at you, and then as you progress, you'll eventually get to the castle and take on this wizard Narzad, and then it turns into a one-on-one battle. And it is a lot of fun. It is super hard. It's a really imaginative game, and it plays extremely well. It is fun, it is unique, and I like this one a lot, and I understand why Lord Carnage gave this such high praise. It is a very, very fun game. Here's another Vector arcade game port, Cosmic Chasm. You play as a ship that's trying to get to the center of a planet, tunnel your way down, and then plant a bomb and get out before it blows. It's kind of like Asteroids mixed with a little bit of another game I have sitting over here that I haven't talked about yet. This one I never remembered seeing in the arcade ever. So I was really looking forward to coming home and trying this one out. And the drilling mechanic, on top of having to shoot everything that's coming at you to stop you, it's a fun, frantic little game. I enjoy it. The second game that was in the lot with this Vectrex that made me say, yes, this is a very good deal after doing some research, is Star Castle, which is another arcade game port. This one is one of the most expensive games available for this console, and I basically got it for, I don't know, $20.
Now that's a sweet deal.
You play as a ship that can fly around the screen, there's enemies coming at you, but there's this fortress in the center that is surrounded by these walls that you have to shoot at and chip away at until you can get a shot off at the fortress in the center to blow it up. It is very hard. The controls are a little loose, so I have a little bit of a hard time controlling my ship compared to some of the other games that are available for this console, but Star Castle is extremely cool. I like this one a lot. I think I saw an arcade cabinet of this once when I was a kid, and that was when I was visiting my family in Ohio, and we went to a Chuck E. Cheese. I remember this being in the center of the arcade, and I walked up to it, and I was just kind of like, I think I just want to go play Tron again. So, I never did play this one back in the day. But, I mean, for a game that came out probably in 1981, 1982 in the arcades, it still holds up. It is a lot of fun. I say fun a lot, don't I? The third game that made me say I'm getting a great deal here on Craigslist is Spike. It talks. This is like Donkey Kong for the Vectrex. This bad dude has kidnapped your girlfriend, taken her to the top of this platform. There's always 3 platforms, and there's gaps in between, and they are constantly scrolling towards you, so you have to move. And then there's a ladder that will disappear and reappear in certain areas that'll help you get to the next level. And then you got to deal with all of the gaps and everything there too. Get to another ladder when that appears to get up to the 3rd level and get your girl back. And then it starts over anew. You are able to jump over the gaps, so it's not like you're going to die all the time. There are enemies coming at you. You have a kick that you can do to kill them. And yes, I've said it a lot in this video, but this game is a lot of fun. I can't help it. The Vectrex games I own are fun. I can't help it. I think only 1 or 2 of them I have are kind of okay. And the other okay one is Scramble. This is an arcade port also, although it was not a vector-based game in the arcade. This is essentially like Defender or Vanguard. It's a side-scrolling shooter, and you have 2 different types of attacks. You can shoot or you can drop a bomb. And the ground level has like texture to it with like peaks and valleys that'll have enemies on it. You can drop bombs on them. Your ship is constantly running out of fuel, so when you bomb fuel canisters that are on the ground level, you'll up your fuel level. And it's okay. I remember playing this in the arcade back in the day and thinking that this one was alright. I got this in the lot, although not this specific one. I ended up buying this one separately. I got just a cartridge only of this, which I ended up trading off to Nintendo of all people. How you doing, Nintendo? Miss your channel. Bring it back, okay?
You're crazy, man. You're crazy.
It's cool in short spurts like Berserk, but outside of that, this one is one that I probably won't play a whole lot. But I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just not my favorite amongst this stack of rad here. And that's it for my Vectrex collection. I am super happy that I now have this in my collection. I display it here on the side of my desk at all times, proudly. People will come over and be like, what is that little TV on your desk over there? And I'll be like, that is the Vectrex. Let me tell you all about it, okay? Got about 20 minutes. And I guarantee you, you're gonna wanna play something when I'm done. Like I said, I always wanted one as a kid, and now, childhood dream achieved! I love this thing. I'm glad that I jumped on it when I did. I'm surprised it lasted on Craigslist as long as it did before I swooped it up. So, I got lucky.
I'm up all night to get lucky.
So have you played the Vectrex? Do you own a Vectrex? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear from you. And if you do own a Vectrex, what are your favorite games for it? Any of the ones I have here? Any of the ones I still need to get? Because there are 29 officially released games for this console, and I have 12 of them. I do want to get more. They are a bit pricey, but I guarantee I'm going to have a few more pretty soon. So thanks for subscribing, and I hope to see you soon. This is Chris, the old ass retro gamer, signing off.